Mike? You have to hit next slide. There we go. And welcome to Ignite. This is our third year here, and wow, we are bigger than ever. This room holds 800 people, and we were able to get beer. So if you would like a drink, feel free to line up. Please do it rather quietly, because geeks like to share. They like to share their ideas, and that's what we're going to be doing here at Ignite today. However, everybody shares a little more freely when they know that the audience has been pacified, when they know that the audience is a little more receptive, and geeks like beer, so that we figure that's the best way to get you in the mood for the 9 next talks that are coming up. Now, who here has been to an Ignite before? All right. Who here has been to an Ignited I.O. before? All right. Well, for those of you who have never been here before or been to an Ignite before, Ignite is a geek event. We'll have a series of 5-minute talks. Each speaker gets 20 slides, 15 seconds per slide. They have no control over their slides. Once their slides start, off they go. So wisely, they all said no to beer. They're each going to have one afterwards, so if they come up to the bar, please let them jump ahead of you. We have 9 awesome talks tonight. We've got the head of security and resource management from Burning Man. We've got Matt Cutts from the Google Spam team, and some administrata. So if you have feedback about this session, if you wanted an even bigger room next year, please vote on that, on Pamela Fox's feedback system. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome my roommate from Boston back in the 90s. He's now at Twitter, and he's going to instruct all of our speakers on how to use a microphone. Please welcome John Adams.
Thank you, Brady. Thank you very much. All right, speaking to the mic. This thing is a microphone. Everyone has one. Everyone's been to a conference. Everyone's used one before, but a lot of people don't know how to use them. So what I want to do is give you a quick history lesson on how we got to where we are today, how we ended up with this thing in our hand, and where it goes. And it all started back in the day with 3 guys. We got Whetstone, Berliner, and Hughes. Whetstone invented this thing called the all-mechanical vibration stethoscope. It was 2 pieces of metal that he used to amplify small sounds. Now, he did a lot of work on telegraph, on technology and security and things like that. He invented the play for a cipher. And one of the things that Hughes did is Hughes invented this thing called the carbon granule microphone. This is a brief diagram of it. We still use this design today in most microphones. And the funny thing about it is it's so simple, but it's really bad. The problem with that is that it is an omnidirectional microphone. This is a Western Electric microphone from the 1920s. This microphone pretty much paved the way for the talkies, for the early movies that actually had audio to go with them. The problem with these were they were big, they were ugly, they sat on a desk, and they were really hard to work with. And by omnidirectional, I mean it listens to everything. This microphone is a unidirectional microphone. If I move it over here, you don't hear me. If I put it in front of me, you don't hear me either. So the thing is that it listens to everything it can get its hands on in the room. So a lot of work was done in the 1930s to improve the pickup pattern of microphones. This is the pickup pattern of Henry Olsen's microphone. Henry Olsen worked for RCA. And this is a figure-8 microphone. It picks up in the front and a little bit in the back. This is really not the best microphone you can have because it has no rejection. This is a cardioid microphone. The thing about the cardioid, it looks like a heart. Olsen refined his microphone by taking 2 microphones, putting them back to back, and subtracting one from the other, and using superposition of waves, was able to delete the interference that came out of the back of the microphone and only give you what was in front of it. And that's the microphone I'm holding today, is a cardioid. This is another famous microphone, 1937 Olsen 77A microphone. You may have seen this on the David Letterman show. This microphone is very popular. It was a ribbon microphone. It really refined and gave you a better audio quality. And this is another famous microphone from the 1940s. This is the Shure 55A. You'll still see this if you go see a swing band at any local nightclub here in San Francisco. It's the favorite of the crooners. It's a really pretty microphone, and it has great, great sound. They're legendary. In the 1960s, a lot of research went into building the electric microphone. And the electric microphone can be seen in everything from telephones to answering machines. About 1 billion of these microphones were produced. They're really amazing little things, and they're based on the original carbon design. In 1966, something amazing happened. The Shure brothers released a microphone called the Shure SM58. This is actually a Beta 52 that I'm using, it looks like. And this microphone is absolutely legendary. You will see this in every nightclub, in every conference. It's everywhere. And the one thing about all this is that when you finally get one of these in your hands, don't be shy. People get frequently mic shy. I mean, I'm up here on stage. It's hard to be on stage, I'll give you that. But the thing is you can't be shy when you have a microphone in your hand. It goes right in the mouth. It goes right here. So the thing is, voices come from your head. They don't come from your chest. They come from your head. Don't be this guy. The microphone does not sit in the stand down below. You have to have the microphone in your mouth. It's kind of scary. Not too much, though. If you put it too much in your mouth, you sound terrible. The big thing about microphones is the distance between you and the microphone makes a huge difference. If I pull back even 4 inches, the sound completely changes. That's the thing. That distance controls everything. The size of your voice, the volume of your voice, and the way that the microphone listens to you. Another interesting thing about microphones, if you get the microphone too close, you get this thing called the proximity effect. The proximity effect is a big boost around 400 hertz. It's a big boost in the volume and the bass of your voice, that big low mid section. And sometimes that's good if you're a rapper, you want that. But the thing is, you get it too close, you might be eating the microphone. Eating the microphone's not good either. The microphone does not go in your mouth, it does not go on your mouth, it goes in front of your mouth. Do not eat the microphone. All right, this is actually, so another thing is overall gain. If the microphone is too loud, what you actually do with your voice is you push the capsule of the microphone down to the back of the mic. And when you do that, the microphone goes into overload and it clips. And the sound guy gets very mad. As a sound guy myself, I've seen this happen before. Another interesting problem is feedback. If the microphone can pick up the speakers that are around you, now up on stage I've got a bunch of these little tiny monitor speakers. If I was to push this microphone into one of these speakers, you get a nice loud squeal and the sound guy would probably kill me. You have to be very careful and very conscious of feedback. And the real thing you want to do is keep that mic straight on and you're going to get great sound. All you can do is put the mic in front of you, even if it's on a stand, and you're going to get fantastic sound tonight. And I hope that all the Ignite speakers tonight have learned something from this, and hopefully we'll have great sound during the performance. And thank you very much.
And hopefully all the speakers for tomorrow have also paid attention. Our next speaker is the editor-in-chief of IO9. She's been giving sci-fi-based Ignite talks since 2007. Please welcome number 6, aka Annalee Newitz.
I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how science fiction represents the future of social media. And I'm lucky because I guess I'm getting a little extra time here. And I think this is an interesting thing to do if you're working with social media, if you're developing it or using it, because it gives you a chance to kind of sit back and think a little bit about what kind of future you might be building with your technology. And also it gives us a chance to kind of take the temperature of the culture and say, well, what are people's fantasies about the future of social media and media that comes from computer networks? You know, what are our hopes and our fears about it? So I'm going to take you through about 4 common stories that science fiction tells us about the future of social media. The first is one that's very popular in science fiction literature and also among developers, which is that some kind of hive mind or artificial intelligence will rise up out of our social networks and out of all of our user-generated data. Even Larry Page is a big fan of this idea and has said that he's enthusiastic and hoping that one day Google search will become an artificial intelligence. Well, the question is, will this artificial intelligence be smart or stupid? Will it be like the AI in Neuromancer by William Gibson, which is so smart that it's able to eventually leave the planet? Will it be kind of a trickster like in Werner Vinge's amazing Rainbow's End? Or will it just be as dumb as a shark as it is in a fantastic short story by Maureen McHugh? There's also the story of the proverbial privacy apocalypse that will be brought on by social media invading every part of our lives, surveilling us, turning the vessels of our entertainment into our own, into a spy show. Obviously, one of the key stories in this genre is 1984, where people are watched by their telescreens. But there's also a number of other stories that deal with this in a slightly different way, which is, for example, in the 1960s, Philip K. Dick's novels, including the short story Minority Report, as well as things like Scanner Darkly, where he imagines a future of ubiquitous advertising and social media that not only invades our lives, but also invades our minds. And I would conclude by talking about a book that just came out in the US called The Quantum Thief by Hannu Rajaniemi. It's been out for about a year. In England, and he suggests that in the future, the way that we'll handle privacy will be that our post-human selves will develop organs that negotiate privacy each time we meet with somebody. And so all of our thoughts are saved to the internet, but we can decide who gets to remember those thoughts and who gets to remember meeting with us and seeing us. Another fear about social media is that it'll lead to mind control. We'll jack our minds into the network, and suddenly there'll be no difference between what corporations want us to think and what we actually are thinking. And there's different ways that this gets played out. The Matrix is a perfect example, where everyone's brains are being controlled by a massive game-like simulation to keep us pacified while we're being used by machines as batteries. So we're reduced to the lowest common denominator. There's another fantasy, of course, that comes out in Neil Stephenson's classic novel Snow Crash, as well as Charlie Strauss's terrific book Glass House, which both are about how people catch viruses in their brains from being plugged into media online. And so basically your brain crashes or stops behaving correctly. And then, of course, there's the movie They Live, which is about how media is actually secretly controlling us, telling us to obey these aliens who've taken over the world. This is a great screenshot from the film when the characters finally see what's going on. Now, the flip side of mind control is the idea that social media will lead to instant social revolution, and that through using social media, the grassroots journalists and reporters and anyone reporting the news will be able to continue doing their work even better. A classic show in this vein is Max Headroom from the 1980s, where an intrepid reporter uses television signals to broadcast ideas that the corporations don't want us to hear. This idea is elaborated also in the classic comic book Transmetropolitan by Warren Ellis, which features a reporter who is telling the truth about crime in the city and using underground means and using social media. Also, social media vigilantes like Anonymous have used V for Vendetta, the classic comic book, which actually isn't about social media, as a symbol for their social media revolutions. Another book that I would recommend if you're interested in social media is Feed, which is about how bloggers are the only people who are willing to report on the zombie apocalypse. And so all of the traditional reporters are killed in the zombie apocalypse, but the bloggers survive. I would say that our hopes and fears about the future of social media are embodied by the phrase from the movie Serenity, "You can't stop the signal," which is the idea that revolutionary ideas will get out, you can't stop that, but also I think the fear is that you won't be able to stop the signal that controls your mind as well. So there's both fear and hope embodied in that phrase. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annalee. And I do want to second that recommendation. Feed is a really fun book, and I am a connoisseur of the zombie genre. I know, and the sequel is coming out soon. Our next speaker has been speaking at O'Reilly conferences for quite a while, usually talking about the interface between body and technology. Today is going to be talking about the Open U project. Please welcome Kyle Machulis.
Hey, what's up, Ignite? Don't answer that. I don't have that much time. My name is Kyle Machulis, and this is your brain, but this is also your brain on bugs. I am looking to put the U back into Coder, even though it didn't have a U in it already, even maybe if you're British, I don't know. So here's what I do. I do a lot of stuff, and it involves game controllers and Abe Vigoda and the Kinect and everything else. Basically, I reverse engineer video game hardware because it's cheap, and people can get to it, and they can use it for research and academia and robots like you saw upstairs. So I really, really like numbers. Obviously. And now there's this new thing called the Quantified Self movement that's all about numbers about you. So you can do all these things like introspection and journaling and basically making yourself a better person, but really it means more hardware because hardware is awesome. So there's consumer hardware, which there's things like EEGs and blood pressure monitors and pedometers and sleep meters. But the problem is with these, the business model is that they upload their data back to a walled garden so that you can only access it through there and you have to pay for it. And it really sucks. And beyond that, there's medical hardware, real honest-to-God medical hardware. This is inside people at the moment, and they can't actually get the data out. Yeah, that's a pacemaker, and it talks wirelessly only to the company that owns it. Freaky. Yeah, so I started this thing called the Open U project. Open U is about reverse engineering all of this stuff and handing it back to the community and then doing really interesting stuff with it too that's just fun. For instance, there's the Golden Gate Wall project. Golden Gate Wall is all about, I am skipping ahead of my own slides. I'm actually going too fast. Awesome. So here's some things that we actually do in our projects. We've done libfitbit for reverse engineering the Fitbit pedometer. There's EmoKit, which is for the emotive EEG to get the raw waves out. These are available in C, Python, Swig, and then we put them all together in projects like Golden Gate Wall, which is all about doing rock climbing the most computational way possible. We scan walls, we take biometrics, and we're trying to do automated route generation. So that really pisses off people. So what all this needs is a shared time base. We need to be able to take all of these sensors, write our own drivers for them, and then record all of them into the same stream of data. And we're not the only people that are doing this. For instance, there's a company named Neurofocus. They're actually over in Berkeley, and they do this for advertising. So they put an EEG on you, and they show you ads, and they watch when your brain reacts to the ad. So they can actually tell whether you really like Tide before you even know you like Tide. But the thing is, I mean, I like rock climbing. I'm not really into advertising, but most of the time, I'm sitting and I'm programming, and I might as well just be flipping off my pedometer at this point. So what can I do about that? The problem is, when I'm programming, I kind of go into this hole. Like, I'll just be like sitting there, and then there's some code, and then it's like 8 hours later, but it only feels like 1 or 2. But there's a product, and it's awesome. But I kind of miss myself at that point. So what can we do about that? And that's why I created the Quantified Coder project. Quantified Coder is all about getting us back into our coding. Because right now, we're sitting there with IDEs, but we aren't really there anymore. So what can we do about that? First off, we need to look at what metrics can we take from the coding environment. There's your chair that we can put accelerometers on. There's your IDE, which we can track. We can check the stroke force of your keyboard. We can put EEGs on you. We can put electromyographs on you. So we'll get to that in a sec. But there's lots of information we can take. And then we can start instrumenting your IDE, because obviously everyone is using Emacs, right? So there are other scriptable IDEs, but why would you use them? But then you can actually add this to the time base with the other sensors I mentioned earlier. So now we track things. We track the sensors on the programmer against their line of code. What were your brainwaves doing when you wrote this line of code? What was your hand doing, and how tense was it when you wrote this line of code? Did you get up? Your pedometer can actually look at when you left your code. And then we can see, when going into a bug review, hey, you were feeling tired when you wrote this code. You got up. You lost your concentration when you wrote this code. More importantly, we can use machine learning. We can use machine learning to say, okay, there was a bug here. How did you feel at this time? Now find all of the other places that you felt the same way while writing this code. Finally, we can get really crazy with this. We can go to social coding projects like Google Code and GitHub and actually upload all of our biometrics together to give a human picture of a library or a framework or something like that, so everyone can know how frustrated you are when you use it. So anyways, that is the Quantified Coder project. I'm looking for help. This is completely open source. I need everyone's data, and I mean all of you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. I apologize. I spoke with him before about the Emacs propaganda, and we had a Kyle. Not next time. All right. Our next speaker is actually the Chief of Emergency Services for Burning Man. I biffed his title earlier, and he's here to talk about risk management at Burning Man and other amusement parks and how it applies to your lives. Please welcome Joseph Pred.
Burning Man, on the very off chance you don't know about it, is the annual fire arts festival that takes place in the northern Nevada desert. And out there we seek to find the balance, the sweet spot between risk and reward and experience. And this is the secret sauce, really, that humans crave and seek intense and vibrant experiences. So we allow that experience to take place between a balance of safety and risk choice. And you say to yourself, well, I don't do risk management. How does this really apply to me? Well, every time you cross the street, you're engaging in risk management, especially if you're jaywalking, like these people are. And so it shows up everywhere in your life once you start looking for it. And what wouldn't a risk management talk be without a few disclaimers? So common sense is not common. So this doesn't apply to financial risk management or any number of other risk categories. And no one likes to be told no. It sacrifices the experience. It lacks flexibility, it lacks creativity. It denies the entire process of learning your own boundaries. And it's not really a form of risk management. It's really bypassing the entire process. It's confused sometimes with risk management, but you're just eliminating the experience. And no one really likes that. And we're also dealing with a society that's got warning label overload. And everywhere you turn, there's warnings, right? Hot coffee may be hot, may cause drowsiness, sharp edges may be sharp. And what that does is it sanitizes the experience through the result of all these lawsuits. And in my mind, Disneyland personifies the sanitized experience. Sure, it's fun, but you've got long lines, barricades, highly controlled and engineered environments. Look, but don't touch. The experience is dictated for you. Burning Man is a bit of an alternative. Sure, it's also engineered for safety, but it's an open environment where risk can be taken as a choice as part of the experience. And people who come to Burning Man accept risk as part of that experience. People come back from the first time, especially saying, my God, I just had the most amazing experience of my life. I feel completely transformed as a person. And the question that I often ask myself is, how many people say that when they return from Disneyland? So know your own level of risk tolerance. This is Philippe Petit crossing between the Twin Towers on a wire. He certainly knows what his level of risk tolerance is. So seek to understand what your level of aversion and tolerance is to risk. And this is a slogan that's really popular in the extended Burning Man community, because if you accept risk, then experience becomes the first priority, not safety. And if you make safety a priority, then you lose the immediacy of the experience. This is my highly unscientific and subjective chart. You got shuffleboard down there, you got cave diving up there, and what's at the origin of danger and fun? In my opinion, it's boredom. Own your own outcomes. If you're gonna play with fire, accept the fact that sooner or later you're gonna get burned. So take and ask others to take responsibility for their own choices and actions. Extreme risks are the ones that you want to eliminate. For example, this is Uchronia. It's several hundred feet in diameter, and it's on fire, by the way. And there's no barricades. This allows for an immediacy and an intimacy with the piece that barricades would just not allow. This is the ladder to nowhere. It's 108 feet tall, and no safety harnesses were provided. So if you chose to engage in this experience and climb this ladder to see what it felt like to be that high up, you were free to do so, or not. And it's imperative that you communicate to people that they're making choices about risk and what they're engaging in. And the more you can communicate that risk, the more people are going to be free to explore their own boundaries. The back of the Burning Man tickets say, by attending this event, you freely accept the risk of injury or death. Because lawsuits are everywhere. You cannot eliminate the risk of lawsuits. Disneyland isn't immune. Burning Man isn't immune. No business is immune. The only way to be immune is to not be in business at all. So if you accept risk as part of the experience, then mitigate the risks that you can while focusing on the experience. And keep in mind my favorite Voltaire quote, perfect is the enemy of good enough. Now, I know for some of you, risk is a little bit too scary, so you can always instead go home and sit on the internet and look at cute pictures of kittens and puppies. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Clear the way for him to get a beer. He was I don't know why he didn't say it, but he's got a book coming out in June, Show Me How to Survive. If I was going to read one survival book this year, it would be his. Our next speaker, you wouldn't know it from looking at her, but she's actually shy, and she's here somehow braving the world to come up here and talk about it. Please welcome ex-Googler, Pamela Fox.
Okay, hi everyone. For the last 5 years, up until a few months ago, I worked at Google as a developer advocate. My job was to give talks, organize events, post in forums, and basically spend all day, every day, communicating with developers. So hearing that, you'd probably think I'm an incredibly outgoing and social person. But I'm not. I'm shy. I'm really shy. What does that mean? Well, for me, it means I'm afraid of approaching people and talking to people, especially when it's me and a group of strangers. Situations like that, I'd much rather be standing in the corner, pretending to amuse myself with some farm animal-themed mobile app. Now, ultimately, it's because I have a fear of rejection. You know, as long as I don't approach people, I don't have to worry that they're going to ignore me or turn me away. And I could not worry about it and just live in a hole for the rest of my life, but eventually holes get lonely. And you need a little of that human touch. Okay, quick survey time. How many of you guys consider yourself shy? Don't be shy, raise your hands, okay? And how many of you want a little of that human touch? Okay, now touch your neighbor. Okay, great. Okay. So you guys, you kind of know what I'm talking about, right? Now, I've been shy for a long time, and I've also been wanting to not be shy for a long time. So I've spent approximately my whole lifetime developing workarounds. And since I think the world would be a better place if we weren't all deathly afraid of each other, I'm going to share some of my ideas with you guys today. So my main approach takes a couple different forms, but it basically boils down to this. Since I'm afraid of approaching people, I need to get other people to approach me. So that means giving them a really good excuse to talk to me. And I can do that in a couple different ways. One way is to get myself in a group of leadership, position of leadership over a group of people. Maybe a group that already exists, or maybe a group I create myself like a club. And once you do that, the people can approach you with group-related matters. Like when I was class president in high school, my classmates would talk to me about what love songs we should play at prom. Now, once you're in charge of that group, you can organize events. Of course, you have to actually get people to show up at the events, but usually if you're interested in something, somebody else will be too. Except this one time when I organized the viewing of Moulin Rouge, that was just me. But stick with tech buzzwords, you'll be okay. Okay, so maybe you think it's too much effort to actually organize a club in order to get people to talk to you. I understand. So a step down from that is to actually be a speaker. When you deliver a talk to a group of people, like I'm doing now, there'll be a whole room of people afterwards that know who you are, and even better, who know what conversation topics they can approach you with. Speaking isn't easy. I still get sick right before I go on stage, but it's worth it. When I went to Sydney, Australia, moved there, didn't know anyone, I gave 2 talks at the local bar camp my first weekend there, and met 90% of my Aussie friends. Find a topic you're passionate about, find a group of people, speak about it. And when you do find an event to talk at, try and talk early in the event, right? If it's a multi-day conference, speak on the first day. If it's a one-day conference, speak before lunch. You're giving people the most amount of time that they can actually approach you and talk to you about stuff in your talk. Okay, so maybe you're not up for speaking, but clearly you guys are about attending events because you're all here today. And I applaud you for that because it's really nerve-wracking to show up at an event with thousands of people you don't know, right? How does anyone approach you in a sea of strangers? Well, they need some conversation topic they know interests both of you. Ideally, we'd all walk around with augmented reality Android apps that would visualize auras of hashtags around each other and auto-target us to whoever has the most overlapping tags. Doesn't exist yet. Maybe after tomorrow's keynote, it will. I don't know. Until then, you can use your clothing and accessories to convey your interest to others. Like when I have bright pink hair, pretty much everybody approaches me on the street. Or I can just wear a geek shirt like this one, and you can come up, we can talk about Git repos, or maybe after a few drinks, hardcore forking action. Now, if you get really desperate, just give away free shit. People love free shit. When I was a kid, in grade school, I used to bring bags of candy to lunch during the holidays, and all my classmates became my best friends. As a Googler, I basically did the same thing, except with free shirts and beer, which is the adult equivalent. But sometimes it can get exhausting to try and be approachable. Sometimes it can get expensive, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So sometimes you simply have to admit you're shy, let people know, and help them make it better for you. At Google, we all eat in these big cafes, and my colleagues would all wander off in different packs every day, and I'd often wander into the cafe alone. I'd look around at all the lunch tables, be way too scared to sit at any of them, and bring lunch back to my desk. I pretended to be all absorbed in my work, but it was just a really sad moment for me every day. And I was tired of being sad every afternoon, so I eventually told my colleague about my lunchtime shyness. From then on, he explicitly invited me to lunch every day and made sure I had a seat at his table. And so I no longer dreaded lunchtime. So really, my ultimate hack in combating shyness was to get a job that forced me to employ all of these workarounds on a near daily basis. I basically got paid to face my fears for 4 years, and now I've got techniques that last me a lifetime. I still get shy, but I've got the workarounds. Okay, so now that I've shared all my shyness hacks with you, I want to hear about some of yours, and I've now given you every possible excuse to approach me, and I want you to use some of those excuses at the after party tonight. I'll be the one in the corner, pink shirt, pink hair, get shirt. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pamela. And now we've got another Googler. He still works for the company, as you may know. We all know him as the guy we go to with any website questions, SEO questions, web spam questions, but it turns out he does a whole bunch of other stuff outside of his job. And he's here to talk about his 30-day challenges. Please welcome Matt Cutts.
All right, my name is Matt. I work in search quality, but I'm going to talk about something completely different, a series of experiments I've been running where I try new and different things for 30 days. All I'm doing is saying, look, my life is in a little bit of a rut, so I'm going to follow in the footsteps of the great American philosopher, Morgan Spurlock. If you remember, a few years ago, he recorded himself eating McDonald's food for 30 days. Now, he's a really well-known filmmaker. So anybody can do this. Anybody can try a challenge. You can do two major types of challenges. You can either add something to your routine, so walking 10,000 steps a day, or biking to work. Or, if you're interested, you can also subtract something from your daily routine. Is Robert Scoble in the audience? He's not. Okay, I can make Robert Scoble jokes. I once did a 30-day challenge where all I did was try to get rid of Robert Scoble from my life. Out of my Twitter. It's surprisingly easy. I'm kidding. I love Robert Scoble. The things that I learned when I did my 30-day challenges. Number one, the time is much more memorable. This was part of a challenge I did to take a different picture every day, and I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing that day. I also discovered that as I did more and more 30-day challenges, I couldn't help but start to get in a little bit better shape, because some of them were things like biking to work. So this is me from a few years ago. Look a little more chipmunk moon pie. But I started out doing a 30-day challenge where I biked to work. And I found after a few days, I actually liked biking to work. That was completely different for me. And so I've lost about 40 pounds over the last few years just from exercising. Thank you. I also discovered that I became a little more adventurous. So last year I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. I would never have been that adventurous. It helps a lot with things like being shy if you're willing to take a new adventure on every 30 days. Once you've done something like climb Mount Kilimanjaro, you think about what do you really want to do. And I've always wanted to write a book. Every November, tens of thousands of people try to write a book from scratch in 30 days. Now it turns out it's not that hard. All you have to do is write 1,667 words a day for an entire month. Here's the secret. All you have to do is make sure that you write your words before you go to sleep that night. You might be sleep deprived, but you will finish your book. Now, a lot of people come up to me and they say, Matt, can I read your book? Or, is it the great next American novel? And the answer is, no! I wrote it in 30 days. It's awful! But for the rest of my life, when I go to a party, I don't have to introduce myself as a computer scientist. If I want to, I can say I'm a novelist. So those are my 30-day challenges. But everybody's going to be interested in something different, right? The lady who cuts my hair decided she wanted to go running with her dog every day. And she discovered she was a morning person. That would not have been my 30-day challenge, but it worked really well for her. It might be trying to go, instead of right-handed, going left-handed for a month. It doesn't matter. You pick what's right for you. Now, I'm going to violate the cardinal rule and be silent while you think of a 30-day challenge you want, and here's a few ideas. Got one? Okay. Here's a few tips about how to do a 30-day challenge. My first one was giving up television for 30 days. I made it easy by watching all the good season finales, and then when the crappy summer reality TV came on, that's when I did my 30-day challenge, right? So make it easy on yourself. I've learned that there's nothing wrong with big, huge challenges. In fact, they're a ton of fun, but small ones are more likely to stick. They're more likely to be sustainable. It's also much easier to add a habit than remove a habit. When I gave up sugar for 30 days, day 31 looked like this. My wife and I went to Krispy Kreme, the grocery store, and every candy store getting all kinds of candy. It was fantastic. I couldn't move for like a day. But the thing is, doing that with my wife made me realize it's really helpful to have a buddy. A buddy keeps you on track. So whether it's writing a book or doing whatever, they're going to keep you honest. They're going to make sure that you're making good progress on it. Here's my final tip. You want to pick a challenge that's kind of interesting. You want the sort of reaction like this, right? It's not just something small. You want to be thinking about what's going to be a good conversation starter? What's going to help me strike up a good conversation with people? So I want to close with a very simple question. The next 30 days are going to pass no matter what. I guarantee it. So why not pick something you have always wanted to try and give it a shot for the next 30 days? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matt. Our next speaker was inspired by the Tiger Moms article that came out in the Wall Street Journal a little while ago, and luckily she happens to work as a data scientist at LinkedIn and decided to see if there's any truth to it. Please welcome up Monica Rogati.
Thanks, Brady. Hi, everybody. I'm Monica Rogati. I'm a data scientist at LinkedIn, and I'm here to talk to you about finding stories in the data. So a few months ago, there's this big controversy about tiger moms and their parenting styles and their outcomes. So I'm a data geek. So my first instinct was, well, let's look at the data. But what kind of data do we have? Well, on LinkedIn, we have 100 million profiles. And on those profiles, you can see things like people's last name, their job titles, and their region. So basically, what you can do is you can look at this data at the global level and sprinkle in some machine learning. And then you can have a pretty reasonable guess about where each of those names originate from, right? So then you can take what you've learned, take it back to the United States, and look at people's profiles. And when you do that, you can look at what job titles are overrepresented for a particular region. And going back to the tiger moms, well, so as it turns out, the tiger cubs do value scholastic achievement and statistics, but they're not the only ones. It turns out you can do this kind of analysis for any type of region or any type of name origin. So we did this for Eastern European names. They look pretty similar. And you can contrast them with Western European names. And they optimize for slightly different metrics. So what else is on LinkedIn? We have career histories of 100 million people. And what you can do with that data at the aggregate level, you can ask questions like, where are people going? What's the hottest industry right now? What are the fastest growing job titles in a given year? So if you do that, you can discover the tech boom in 1999 and the corresponding bubble burst when everybody went back to school. And you can look at today, right, and see the rise in social media and data scientists, of course. And you can see fads like gurus going to ninjas, going to rock stars. So how do you find these stories in the data? Well, there are 3 simple ingredients: aggregate, normalize, and dig. So aggregate across interesting dimensions, normalize your raw data, and dig, ask why, find the reason for the trend. So when you aggregate, you can take some interesting data like when people change their job and get a promotion. And you can aggregate it by country and by month. And then you can find interesting trends like rediscovering India's fiscal year. Then you have to normalize. That's crucial. You have to find the denominator. There is always a denominator. You have to look for what's overrepresented, not just popular. Here, if we wanted to see a trend, we had to look at relative change. So then you have to dig. I have to ask why. Why do you see that trend? In this case, we looked at when people were born, and we found our answer. It's the millennials. They don't care what month of the year it is. They want their promotion. So, let's see. Let's take another story. Top overrepresented CEO names on LinkedIn. Peter, Bob, Jack. You might look at those names and say, Well, those are just popular baby names 50 years ago. And you're right, but that's not the whole story. To find the real story, you have to dig. And look at the length of the names. If you look at that, you find quintessential sales guys like Chip, Todd, and Trey, right? The CEO distribution is not as skewed, Jack, Fred, Bill, but they still want you to be your friend. So they use nicknames. So the media loves this stuff. So the question is, how do you communicate the data stories? The infographics are awesome, but the story itself has to be compelling. It has to be interesting, it has to be accessible, and it has to be relatable. Howard Stern covered this because one of the CEO names was Howard. So obviously there's lots of interesting data stories, and we all love data and we want more of it. I'm no different, that's my license plate. But the data isn't enough. What you want is you want to dig and find the story in the data. So if you like finding stories in data and love big data, let's chat. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Monica. Our next speaker is also going to talk about data, except it's about inane data. Please welcome NYU's Patrick Davison.
So it was just before Thanksgiving of 2009 when my roommate Mike Rignetta came into the living room to tell me that the music video for Avril Lavigne's Girlfriend had been deleted from YouTube. He and I knew this because Avril Lavigne's Girlfriend was part of what we call the Golden Four, which was, to our knowledge, the first 4 YouTube videos to have over 100 million views. Now, Mike Rignetta and I are a little bit different than a lot of people because we see YouTube comments as having a distinct cultural value. So we've been looking at these for the last 2 years, and we've come up with 3 challenges in doing so, and that's what I want to talk about today. Challenge number 1 is that YouTube comments are kind of hard to hold on to. In the case of Avril Lavigne's Girlfriend, if the video disappears, so do all of your comments. And even if the video doesn't disappear, it turns out that Google and YouTube's API only allows you to grab the last 1,000 comments, which I talked to the API guys a couple hours ago, and they said they're going to undo that by the end of the month. So maybe challenge 1 is gone, so never mind. Also, spoiler alert, if you're like really worried about the Avril Lavigne situation, you should know that it just got taken down so they could convert it to Vivo. So it's back up. You can like find it. You just Google or YouTubeable that. It's fine. So what's challenge 2? Challenge 2 is really global warming. As the world gets warmer, YouTube comments tend to stick together. Now, I don't know anything about global warming. This is not true at all. But there is a very smart historian named Paul N. Edwards who has studied the history of climate science, and he says something like this, which is, virtually everything we know about anything complex depends on computer models, right? When you have a system of data that's as complex as the world's climate system, you need computers to help out, right? He puts it shortly this way. No one lives in a global climate, right? There's no single person in the entire world who's experienced the weather of the entire world. That's where the computers come in. And it's funny that he says this because there's another theorist named Wendy Chun, and she doesn't write about the weather, but she does say, is a global picture of new media possible, right? So if we can believe that one person can't experience all the weather of the world, I think it's easy to believe that one person can't experience all of the YouTube comments in the world. Right? I mean, it only takes a little while looking at this list of all of the usernames of everyone who's commented on Avril Lavigne's Girlfriend to realize how complex this system actually is. And that's before you realize that this is just for one video and is just the people who have commented in the last 3 weeks. If you take every comment for every video for all of time, then that system starts to seem just about as complex as maybe the world's weather system. So what do we do with this, right? Well, there are some differences. Climate data is definitely scientific data, right? It's things that you can count and measure. But YouTube comments tend to be made of cultural data. It's things like language and sentiment that are a little bit harder to pour into a database, right? I mean, if you think about Shakespeare, for instance, what do we do with Shakespeare? We read Shakespeare, right? We don't use it to make a tag cloud. And if we do, it feels kind of wrong. It feels kind of dirty, like you're not doing it justice. But, I mean, you know, YouTube's not Shakespeare. But I mean, if you spend enough time looking at YouTube comments, which I do, you'll find what I would describe as hidden poetry. Right, so we've got the first two challenges. Where does this leave us? We've got access and the need for models that give us a giant system of cultural data that's a little hard to get at. All right, what's our third challenge? Well, our third challenge makes the first two harder. Right, so me and my roommate Mike, we can sit at home and we can come up with these grassroots methods, and we can show people like lists and like analyses that we've made, like sitting in our bedroom. But the reaction's always going to be the same, which is whoever we show this to is going to be like, okay, great, so why did YouTube comments are worthless. Why did you do this? I think maybe my dad summed it up best last week when he tweeted at me saying that YouTube comments are basically more like verbal vomit. This third challenge is the attitude that people have towards this kind of data. So if there's one lesson that I can leave you with that global warming has taught me about YouTube comments, it's this. Climate scientists, right? They study the weather. Whether it's bad weather or good weather, it's data to them. And if we want to be serious about being cultural scientists, then we need to treat that data the same way. YouTube comments might be the shitty snowstorm of the internet, but we still need to pay attention. Thanks.
If you enjoyed Patrick's talk, he's also a writer and on Know Your Meme, which we all love. And then he also did my all-time favorite Ignite talk called Plight of the Digital Chickens, which you can find on YouTube. Our last speaker is also an ex-Googler, and he's here to talk about open versus closed. Please welcome Kevin Marks.
Thank you. So I spent a lot of time on the Gilmore Gang arguing about openness versus closeness with the guys there. And I wondered, what got me there. So I thought I'd look back through my history and work out how I came to these conclusions in the first place. That isn't actually my history, it's my country's history, okay. Back in feudal times, land was the key to everything. If you own land, that gave you control, that gave you power over other people, you could force them to do things. So land ownership was key, and land, you have to compete over it. If I have it, you can't have it. And this spread into culture too. When professions were set up, they were granted royal charters. They were basically given a monopoly over that profession to decide who could do it and who couldn't do it, because that was the assumption that came from land. It moved along that way, and it fed into copyrights and patents too. In effect, the copyright rules are medieval monopolies granted by the state that says you can do this, nobody else can. It's like the same charter they granted to the British East India Company that said only you get to go to India. Excluding others was what they thought was the key to extracting value. If you look at patents like this wonderful one for an eraser that goes on your finger, the whole point is that's such a brilliant idea, nobody else can possibly do this without paying me too. But actually, we know that exclusivity is the enemy of culture. I won't rehearse the argument. Lessig has been doing this for 10 years. Go read some of his books, watch his presentations. The point is culture is built on other people's thoughts and ideas too. That's how they connect together. That's how we get culture in the first place. And keeping this stuff locked up is really fragile. If you stop people copying stuff and sharing stuff, you can lose it. The Internet Archive is trying to preserve the internet from these kind of losses, and they said if you keep stuff secret, it would cost you thousands of dollars to preserve it forever. If you share it in public, it's a different story. So back to my personal history. I joined the BBC in 1988, and one of the first places I worked was the BBC Archive, where they have racks and racks of videotapes and films on the walls. But the thing is, they weren't copying the videotapes. The oxide fell off the tapes, and they lost about 10 years' worth of programming because they weren't doing rolling backups. And what they had to do was go round to the people who'd been illegally copying the tapes onto private stuff and get them back so we can see old Doctor Who's. So there's a project called Lots of Copies Keep Stuff Safe at Stanford, which is trying to do this digitally. I recommend looking at the principles of that. The point is, if you want culture to persist, you have to have lots of copies of it. So a few years later, I worked on a CD-ROM title called 3D Atlas. If you bought a Mac around that time, you probably got it bundled with it. We sold 2 million copies. It was pretty successful. Things were great. We thought, great, we'll build lots more CD-ROMs. But a couple of years later, CD-ROMs weren't so hot. There was this internet thing. So we had this brilliant idea. What if instead of making 3D rendered movies, we chopped up the pictures of the Earth into little tiles and stored those all on a server and fetched them over the internet and then stuck them together with a 3D card? We built this in '97, but the people who owned the company decided they didn't want to do this. They'd rather shut the company down. So I had to go and find another job. But I couldn't take that idea with me. So when Keyhole and Google Earth came out a few years later, it was like, oh, yeah, somebody did it too. Sort of personally painful. But I'm glad somebody else did it. So in 1987, Apple produced this thing called HyperCard. Anyone here remember HyperCard? Yeah, OK. Some of you are as old as me. It let you do this web-like thing of making little textual things that link together. In '91, they built this thing called QuickTime. It played movies over the net. It was very powerful. I went and worked there at Apple. I joined in 1997, and they were going to join them together. Combine HyperCard and QuickTime, build this beautiful thing. But Steve Jobs killed it. And he's proud of that. He boasted about it last year. He said, we were right to kill HyperCard. It was crap, just like flashes. I paraphrase slightly. So the problem with closed software is it's fragile. It takes one bad decision to kill it, and all those people who had built business software on HyperCard were no longer able to do anything. They were sitting there waiting for another release from Apple. The release was there. They built it for OS X. It's still sitting in the vaults at Apple, but it's been shut off. So open source is great for engineers, because engineers, even if they leave the company, can take their source with them. If I'd open sourced the 3D Atlas thing in '96, I could have carried on working it after they shut the company down. That would have been great for me. But it's also great for the companies, because the companies can then have access to the engineers after they've left. Now, this is the long quote from Ian Hickson, but basically he's saying the point of the HTML5 project is to preserve culture, to make sure that we can still read the web in the future by documenting how this stuff works. Because the real value of this openness stuff is summed up here by Doc Searls. No one owns it, everyone can use it, and anyone can improve it. The point is that you gain more control by giving up ownership because you're giving everyone else control too.
All right, thank you all for coming out. The videos will be up on igniteshow.com and up on YouTube later. Now, in case you've never been to an Ignite before, or there isn't one locally, Ignite is all over the world. It's in over 200 cities. And basically, all you need is a projector, beer, and gullible people. So if you want to start an Ignite, and I mean, there's hundreds more of these logos where these came from, just contact me or go to igniteshow.com/how-to and just start your own. I'd like to thank Google for having us back for the 3rd year, and thanks to all of our speakers. Could you give them a round of applause? Thank you very much.